Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Uncanny Treks. We are talking about an obscure series from 2008 from Marvel. It is called Legend of the Blue Marvel from 2008. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. The writer on Legend of the Blue Marvel is Kevin Grevioux. The art is by Matt Broom. Matt, you're a different Matt than this Matt because this Matt is only 1T Matt. You're 2T Matt.
Yeah.
2T Matt, how you doing this evening?
I've met very few 1T mats. That's an interesting way to spell that. I'm doing pretty well, Bob. I will say I did not know a lot about Blue Marvel. In a previous episode, I mentioned that I knew the character from Marvel Snap, and he's a pretty strong character in that particular card game. I was confused when I first pulled the cover of the book because the character I remember didn't have a helmet, but then the book explained all that.
Before we get into the book itself, to give everybody a little context on the creative team, I haven't read any other comics written by Kevin Grevioux, but he did have another run at Marvel around this same time in 2008 that was on a New Warriors comic. I don't think it lasted that long, but I need to get into the New Warriors maybe, but I never have. And the thing we would know him from, though, is actually his acting work. So he was the voice of Black Beetle on Young Justice.
Oh, that like deep voice.
Yeah, deep voice. That's Kevin Grevioux. Then he's apparently a background Starfleet security officer in a lot of DS9 episodes.
Oh, okay. Kevin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then we also know Matt Broom from things too, or at least I do. So I don't know if you remember this, Matt, but when I was a kid, I had one or two of these comics. They were early 90s X-Force comics, and Broom did the art on 26, 27, and 29. And I had at least one, maybe two of them, and you maybe read it off me. They're Sunspot-focused issues, and they're fighting a villain called Rainfire, who I don't think it's revealed at the time, but it's revealed years later that Rainfire is an evil future version of Sunspot.
I just Google image these comic covers. Yes, Bob, I do remember reading these. How did we end up with these random How did you end up with these random comics? Like
You remember how, I don't think it was at Walmart, maybe it was at Big Lots, you would buy a thing that would be like 10 random single issues.
Oh yeah, grab bag.
That's the word. I got this out of a grab bag. That's also the single issue of X-Men 2099 I think also came from a grab bag. And I want to say my parents bought the grab bag for me before we took a trip to Noonan to see my great-grandmother. So I was reading it on the trip to and back from Noonan.
Oh wow, so you didn't have your phone with you or anything to play games?
No, Matt, I did not have my phone with me in 1993.
You didn't have your Game Boy?
No, Matt, I did not have a Game Boy until much later.
Oh, there you go. I forgot about the grab bags. Yeah, Walmart used to have those all the time. I remember getting a bunch of random early 90s Superman comics that were in the middle of crossovers and stuff. It would just be those,
Oh, yeah.
it would be those random issues. And then sometimes you would get like really, probably books you shouldn't get, Witchblade and stuff with like art that was
Yeah.
insane. But then you also have some random Superman issue in there.
Exactly. It was a real crapshoot.
It really was. It would be much better just to go to a comic book store and dig through, the clearance bin.
I didn't go back and look at X-Force issues 26, 27, and 29, but in my memory, Broom's art on this comic doesn't remind me of what I remember of his art from those issues, but that might just be a childhood memory thing. But it does raise another point about the art I wanted to briefly mention, is that the art is fairly irregular in this comic. And I think that's because every issue, there's two inkers credited. So you've got two different people inking Broom, it would seem. And after the first issue, you also get two pencilers credited. You get Broom, and then a Peruvian artist named Roberto Castro gets credited. The two pencilers and two inkers is why the art's so irregular.
You can tell that as you go through the book that something a little off, but it didn't bother me. It didn't detract from the story.
But go ahead and plunge into it, Matt. I think I've pulled out enough little things for us to respond to that, in effect, tell the listeners the story without us needing to actually do summary bits. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that's fine.
One of the things about this comic is it goes back and forth between the early 60s and the present day of Marvel, which this is the late aughts. And so it's the era of the Brian Bendis Avengers. And it's maybe a little before Norman Osborn takes control of the government, but it's around that Secret Invasion siege era. We start out in number 1, and I'll try to signal when we're going from the past to the then present. But we start out on the first couple of pages, and we have the Mighty Avengers lineup. And I think this is the lineup from either the Bendis era or Dan Slott, I think, takes over Mighty Avengers at some point while Bendis is still writing the other main Avengers books. But do you want to read down our roster for the Mighty Avengers early in issue number 1, Matt?
We have Wasp, Wonder Man, Black Widow, Yellow Jacket, Iron Man, Miss Marvel, aka Captain Marvel, Ares, Sentry, and She-Hulk. What's so interesting to me is all of these have, or with the exception of Wonder Man, all of these have made an appearance in the MCU, with Wonder Man appearing in late January of next year. So, wow, they've got all the Mighty Avengers.
Yeah, although Yellow Jacket has been reimagined as a villain
Right.
and has, oh, yes, Sentry did show up in Thunderbolts.
Correct.
And then has Ares shown up?
Oh, wait a minute. Ares, I feel like he has, but I don't know where. Shoot. There had to have been some point he showed up in something. That may be one we have to look back at.
Ares is one I'm not super familiar with. As far as I understand, this is just the Greek god of war. At this point in comics, like this late aughts point, they were pushing Ares pretty heavy. I think he was also in Norman Osborn's Villainous Avengers at some point. And I don't know if we'll ever go back to it, but if we ever read Hickman's first Marvel series, Secret Warriors, which we might, but I'm not jonesing to. But if we do, I think Ares is pretty major in that comic.
Based on what I'm reading right now, he was originally the villain for Thor and Hercules.
Yeah, they're trying to make him more of like an anti-hero, I think.
I can see with the look too. He's he's not the God of War you see in the video games.
And it actually might be because of God of War that they're pushing him. I've never read this, but there was a period when, I think when Hulk was off planet on Planet Hulk, they gave Hercules the Hulk book. And I wonder if in the Incredible Hercules run, maybe that was a time when Ares got pushed right before this. I don't know.
That would make sense. I will say though, Bob, the art here is a bit telling about the time. You've got Iron Man and he has a mouth. I cannot stand when they draw an actual mouth on Iron Man.
Yeah, but this is still present Iron Man, though, right? 1962.
It is. It's present Iron Man.
A lot of times I feel the Iron Man mouth is more broadly, if you hear that, you think you're looking at a flashback. Matt, my guess at your favorite panel from this issue was going to be on page 14 in number 1. And we have a splash page. This is back in 1962. And we have a splash page of Blue Marvel having defeated his nemesis, Ant-Man. But Blue Marvel's costume is torn, and it reveals that he is black, he is African American, to the shock and horror of the white 1962 crowd.
Yeah, it's really sad. But yeah, that panel right there is extremely powerful. When you do see that his mask falls apart in the battle and people are like looking at him, about to call him names we don't use. It's not nice.
Matt, did you catch a couple pages later, we had a little cameo of Robert Kelly that in 1962, he's working for JFK's NASA?
I did see that. Wow, we got a Robert Kelly here. We're going to tie in with the mutants.
He's the mutant-hating senator / sometimes mutant-loving senator from, you probably most know him from X-Men the Animated Series, but he's around in the X-Men comics sometimes too.
And a big part of this comic, you move into the whole, you're really making a comparison to the Civil Rights Movement and then also with the mutants and the Avengers, the heroes who are born with their condition and those who aren't. We'll move into that a little further. That's what this book delves into to some degree, which I found fascinating. That to me made me think a lot. It's always been there, that comparison, but this book really points it out and highlights a lot of what goes on in the Marvel Universe and in retrospect, what goes on in our world.
To that, my favorite line in the first issue. So the revelation that Blue Marvel, this Superman level hero in the early 60s, is African American, is concerned for the military and the political elites in the US. And so a lot of this issue is the Kennedys and the generals and Robert Kelly arguing about what to do about Blue Marvel. RFK, JFK's brother, then Attorney General, sums it up to him on page 22, which I thought was the best line of the comic, where RFK says to JFK, if the roles were switched and it was you and not Adam Brashear who couldn't drink from a public water fountain, making things slightly better be good enough for you? Because there's this fear among the white elite of an apartheid society that if a black man has the power of Superman, he's going to use his powers to create equality and positive social. We get a little nod to JFK conspiracies in this issue too. So it's interesting that both in the Marvel universe and probably in our universe, JFK was probably killed by sinister forces. But that's not really the main focus of the
JFK does award Blue Marvel the Presidential Medal of Freedom in hopes that it will ease some of the tension that
eases us into the cliffhanger, which what's the cliffhanger about?
Right, which is JFK hopes that Adam will forgive the U.S. for asking Blue Marvel to stand down.
We have the superhero in the Marvel universe being asked to stand down because he's African American. So the country has betrayed Adam. The country has betrayed the Blue Marvel. That moves us on into issue number 2. And I just wanted to point out that in the present, we're dealing with Tony Stark as director of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I'd totally forgotten that that was a thing, but that was indeed a thing. And we have Tony researching the Blue Marvel protocols from the early 60s of these series of plans that the military had developed to contain Blue Marvel. And Matt, did that give you shades of Justice League of America, Tower of Babel over across the street at DC?
Oh, totally. Lots of contingency plans by the government to ensure that Blue Marvel doesn't take over the country. Good Lord.
And my favorite line in issue number 2, Matt, do you know Duggan? Are you familiar with
Oh,
him?
yeah, I know
Yeah.
Duggan.
I don't love, but I do like how in this comic, every time he says shellhead at Iron Man, I feel like he's actually saying shithead. It has the same intonation.
That's the intent.
I enjoyed that. I never thought of shellhead as a euphemism for shithead before, but I appreciate that. Speaking of euphemisms, we also get another euphemism from Dum Dum. Have you ever heard the expression cheese and rice as a euphemism?
No, I'd never heard that.
Instead of saying Christ, you say cheese and rice. A few other little minor tidbits from this issue, and I want to guess at your favorite panel, Matt. So we get a mention of Gabriel Prosser, who led a slave revolt, which I thought was a neat thing to have referenced in a Marvel comic. Last issue, we saw Robert Kelly. This issue, we see Bolivar Trask in 1962, the creator of the Sentinels. And then we get a cheesy origin of the name Project Wide Awake from the 90s X-Men comics. So that was another little cheesy tidbit, cheesy Easter egg they give you. Then, Matt, to get to my guess at your favorite panel, my guess at your favorite panel was when we see Blue Marvel in the grasp of a green alien.
Yeah, it's pretty cool when they're fighting out in space. 'Cause it goes from this tension-filled racial inequality type plot to this man out in space just beating up a cosmic being. There's no balance. Why are we worried about this when this is what this man is doing for us?
Yeah, it is interesting that the Blue Marvel stuff we see in these issues a little bit oscillates between very all-star Superman or 1970s space Superman adventures and the social realism of the white elite power structure freaking out at a black Superman
on Earth.
That leads us into the cliffhanger. What's the cliffhanger for issue number 2?
It's revealed that Adam's wife is a S.H.I.E.L.D. spy, and she gives him a call.
Which is also a messed up thing, right? Not only do they make him stand down, but they're so worried about him that they recruit a white woman to seduce him and marry him and keep him under surveillance.
It's pretty bad. Now, they've got 2 kids, too. They did point that out as well. So that's the other weird part is you find out she's a spy, but at the same time, she's deep undercover.
And this is jumping ahead, and she justifies it later. I don't know how much of this we're supposed to believe, although I think the comic wants you to believe her. But we jump ahead later, and she's, look, I took it as a job, but I quickly actually fell in love with you, and they stopped getting in contact with me. Yes, it's based on a lie, but
feelings were real.
I mean, we'll talk more about Blue Marvel's wife at the end of the comic, but I don't remember Blue Marvel's kids playing a major role in his subsequent appearances, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm just totally forgetting that.
Well, Bob, one is going to Spelman in the fall, and there's Max. Max is going to Howard University. So they're both in college. That's why you never see them.
Howard and Spelman, if people don't know, are famous and prestigious historical black colleges.
HBCU.
HBCU, that's it. To move to number 3, Matt, I did want to talk about the cover of this issue a little bit. And to set it up right, you were talking about not knowing Blue Marvel having a helmet or a mask. And
correct.
I didn't remember this either, but it is a big part of this series. And it's interesting because in his initial appearance, it's very thematically interesting that the initial Blue Marvel costume has to cover his entire body, right?
Right.
So that nobody knows he's black. But it is interesting that in a sense, it makes this a passing narrative, right? Because in a sense, he's not misrepresenting himself as white, but he's also letting people assume he is white because he knows it would be too much trouble so he's trying to dodge the question of his racial identity. And so that's an interesting thematic element to this. In general, there's the thematic implications of Blue Marvel having a white mask, but there's also just the practical thing that as it's drawn by Matt Broom on the cover for number 3 and on a couple of the later covers, it really to me looks like Dr. Fate's helmet. I don't think that's like symbolic of anything, but I just thought it was interesting how much it looks like Dr. Fate's helmet.
It really does look a lot like Dr. Fate's helmet.
There's a lot that's interesting to say about superheroes and racial identity in American history, moving from the beginnings of superheroes in the late 30s to now. To keep moving on racial themes, racial connections, in issue 3, we get name drops of Richard Wright and Frantz Fanon, two great black writers, one a novelist, one more of a therapist and a philosopher. Very nice to see them name dropped in a Marvel comic as well. Then Matt, guess, instead of your favorite panel, I wanted to guess at your least favorite panel,
Yeah.
and that was on page 12. Realistic depiction of the Watcher, and it's even more unsettling than the Watcher usually is, at least in my eye. So I assumed this was your least favorite panel.
Yeah, it's the Watcher cosplay or something. I don't understand what's wrong with it. His head is not big
No,
enough.
that's a great point. Is it does look like somebody would look if they went to a Comic Con dressed as the Watcher.
Because his head's not big enough. He's supposed to be alien. He's not alien here. He looks like some bald white man dressed up as the Watcher, and then of course he switches color.
Even though I hate the Watcher in general, and
Yeah.
I hate how he looks here, but it does set up my favorite line of the issue, which is Adam saying this upon first seeing the Watcher on the moon. He's like, I'm on the moon, I'm 40,000 kilometers from Earth, and the first thing I see is a giant alien white man with an attitude, which is a great line. And then in response to what Adam says to him, Utah the Watcher turns his skin black, right? Which is an interesting visual, but doesn't get to the issue that, man, the Watcher looks creepy in this realistic way. Matt, what's the cliffhanger for issue number 3?
The cliffhanger for issue 3, Bob, is Adam is tapping on the window of the helicarrier to get Tony Stark's attention.
Issue number 4. And I did want to ask, on page 3, we have Adam rejecting the idea of reparations from Tony Stark. I was curious as you read this, did you think this was meant to be a larger political statement? Or did you think this was meant to be the comic wanted to represent Adam as having this type of arch individualist personality?
I think that individual's personality, but also there's so much awkward back and forth between Reed, Tony, and Adam here that it's trying to show when you do finally get all these white people in a room with a black guy who's got a point, it's a lot of talking over each other.
Pretty hard for the white guys to deal with a black man having a point. Although my favorite line from this comic comes from having Reed, Hank, Tony, and Adam all in the room. And it's also funny that, these are 4 of the smartest guys in the universe all together. But there's a superfluous line of Reed taking a shot at Hank Pym for Hank having anger issues, which I really enjoyed. It's petty, but I enjoyed it. It's also interesting to get back to more serious thematic stuff. It is interesting to see Reed be, to put it in the parlance of the time, woke on mutant issues, because Franklin is a mutant. And it is interesting, the Marvel Universe's central divide of having the Avengers and the Fantastic Four be loved and have the X-Men be hated. I still feel like that doesn't really work conceptually, although people always can make the point that, racism doesn't make sense either, which is a fair point, but I don't love, the Avengers and the Fantastic Four beloved by the public, the X-Men hated and feared. But I do think it is interesting to have Adam as basically Black Superman make a third pole in that debate. So now you would have the public perception of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, you would have the public perception of Adam as the Blue Marvel, and you would have the public perception of X-Men. And turning that from a polarity into a triangle is interesting.
It really is, Bob. And the whole mutants are bad because they were born that way is such a weird thing, but I could see humans totally agreeing with that thinking, especially if you were part of some religious cult that believed being born that way is one thing, but receiving the powers afterward through some sort of divine intervention, like a spider biting you, or cosmic radiation embracing you, those are different from God cursing you when you're at birth.
On the one hand, I'm not saying that it's wrong to have the mutants be an allegory for racism, for diversity, for inclusion, right? There's some really, really interesting stories have come out of that. The Grant Morrison X-Men run, God Loves Man Kills. So I'm not saying that it's like wrong to do stories like that, but there is a way in which reading mutants as an allegory for whether it's racial identity or sexual orientation or a bodily ability is a weird thing. In the Marvel Universe, mutants literally are different. They literally have magical powers that in some cases might destroy the world. And the whole point of being an anti-racist or being anti-sexist or being anti-homophobia is pointing out that no, people are people, right? Like people have slightly different cultures, slightly different values, but we're all people. We're all the same human species. So there's something a little weird about doing the mutant allegory to talk about racism and inclusion. I do think it is blazing more ground in 2008. Although if you look on Goodreads, a lot of people are comparing it negatively to Truth, Red, White, and Blue, which is the comic where you find out that before they actually created Captain America, they did a bunch of experiments for Captain America on black guys.
I was going to ask you about that, Bob, because that is a big thing in the MCU with that Winter Soldier and Captain America show. The name of the character is Isaiah Bradley. He was the most interesting part of that show. And then they brought him into was he mentioned in the new Avengers film?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't
Maybe.
watch it.
I thought you did.
Right.
Watch Thunderbolts?
No, dog, I did not watch
Oh,
Thunderbolts.
I think he's brought up in it as well. But
Yeah,
that character
well,
to
'cause
me
he's-
shares a great deal of the same issues that Blue Marvel shared. But I think they would have it would have been better for them to go in the Blue Marvel direction at the MCU, because the story itself to me is stronger than that of Isaiah Bradley.
Oh, interesting. I think the reason they went with Isaiah Bradley in the MCU instead of Blue Marvel is twofold. One is the brand connection to Captain America. And then the other is that you probably already know this. Isaiah Bradley is the grandfather for Elijah Bradley, who's an important character in the Young Avengers.
Okay.
And it seems like, I'm not sure if they're ever going to get here, but it seems like they're eventually setting up to do the Young Avengers in the MCU. That's why they went with Isaiah Bradley rather than Adam Bashir. Does that make sense?
They also wanted to make that connection between when they were, because that was the series that turned Sam Wilson into Captain America. So I think they wanted that connection.
It is interesting that on the one hand, both this and that comic Truth are so similar, right? Of unearthing the secret history of a black superhero.
Yes.
But on the other hand, and they're also both about the betrayal of the black superhero by America, which makes total sense. But there is something interestingly thematically different, that Truth is about a very specific crime, right? The very specific crime that was done at the Tuskegee Institute of infecting black men with syphilis to study the progress of the disease, right?
Right.
And so in a way, it's referencing that very specific historical event in that comic. And so it's more about like the questions of the cover up and responsibility. Whereas the interesting way, Legend of the Blue Marvel is more of a black Superman comic, and how would the white American power structure respond to a black man with the powers of Superman? It's interesting that on the one hand, they're so similar, but on the other hand, they're moving in very different directions.
Totally.
To go from the very serious to the very ridiculous, I'm not saying this to dunk on the comic, because I actually had to check, right? But on page 10, Blue Marvel has a Fortress of Solitude that's in the Mariana Trench, right? And so he's going into the Mariana Trench, which the comic describes as the Atlantic Ocean. And I was pretty sure the Mariana Trench was in the Pacific, but I had to look up to see, is the Mariana Trench really in the Pacific? Yes, it is. It's not in the Atlantic. But then I also had to be, in the Marvel Universe, is the Mariana Trench in the Atlantic or the Pacific? Because it might be different. And it is, in fact, in the Pacific in the Marvel Universe, as far as I can tell. But I think the origin of this error is that Blue Marvel is about to meet Namor, and Atlantis usually in the Marvel Universe is in the Atlantic Ocean, as the name would suggest, right? And so I think that's what the editor or what the writer was thinking that got us to saying the Mariana Trench is in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, thanks for making that clarification, Bob. I was very concerned about that. I know our listeners are probably on the edge of their seats.
They were on the edge of the seats now. And so this leads us to what I think is probably your favorite panel, where we see Adam in his underwater Fortress of Solitude, which, is complete with a Batcave style mechanical T-Rex. So Namor shows up. Namor and Blue Marvel have a pretty cool exchange that will pay off later. But I did want to note that Namor is drawn in a similar way to the Watcher, but I don't find it quite as off-putting as I did with the Watcher. So what's the cliffhanger in issue number 4?
Anti-Man and Blue Marvel trade flashbacks before Anti-Man defeats Blue Marvel.
All right. So moving into issue 5, our final issue, Matt, and then my guess at your favorite panel was we see a fight scene where Ares and Sentry both managed to draw blood from Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel blades a little bit. Was that your favorite panel?
I could go with that, Bob, for sure.
Okay, 2 other possibilities, Matt.
What are the others, Bob?
The next page, we see Blue Marvel punching the Sentry through the space shuttle.
Okay, yeah, I did like that.
You did like that. And the final one was we see Reed trying to comfort Sue Storm and Adam's wife as well while he's holding a huge laser gun.
I'm gonna go with the spatial one.
My favorite line in this comic was, or really there were two competing. One is that Ares calls Sentry Golden One. That's sweet. It's nice that Ares has a nickname for Sentry. It also feels slightly homoerotic, which I thought was interesting. I like that. And Ares is a Greek god, so that would be in his wheelhouse, I think. Or the other option was when Adam has to admit, when Blue Marvel has to admit that Namor was right. I like that moment.
Anytime you have to admit Namor's right.
So, what's the climax of this issue?
Well, Bob, Adam's wife dies.
So she becomes Uncle Ben.
Yeah, she becomes Uncle Ben.
And it's thematically interesting to have somebody have the traumatic Marvel death of the family member or the loved one, but it to happen so late in their life. That's thematically very interesting to do that.
It is different than what we're used to. I agree.
Before we move into talking about other Superman knockoffs or rankings, Matt, any overall thoughts on the Legend of the Blue Marvel?
The story was well done. They could have gone in this direction in the MCU with this character.
Speaking of Superman, I was going to ask. So, yeah, this clearly Adam, Blue Marvel, on some level, he's just a Marvel Superman, right? Which I was trying to think of all the Superman knockoff characters I could think of. So, do you want to read list I came up with?
Bob, based on your list, you've got Sentry from Marvel. You've got Icon from Milestone, who I first thought of when I saw Blue Marvel.
As Black Superman characters go, or just Superman characters in general, I do prefer Icon to Blue Marvel. Both are cool, but I prefer Icon.
Yeah, Apollo from Wildstorm I'm not familiar with.
That's the gay one who's in a relationship with Midnighter.
Gotcha.
He's usually in a white costume.
Hyperion from Squadron Supreme. Supreme from Image. Homelander from The Boys. Mr. Majestic from Wildcats. And Gladiator from the Imperial Guard.
Those are all the ones I'm pretty familiar with. I understand their deal. Then there's three others that I'm less familiar with.
Omni-Man is the one that I'm not familiar with, but apparently he's just Superman in a different universe.
but I think evil. Because he's from Invincible. You haven't watched Invincible?
I have not, no.
Okay, I thought you had.
My brother keeps telling me. I've watched The Boys.
You know evil Homelander from The Boys.
Right, yeah, I know him.
I haven't watched The Boys, but I have read The Boys comic.
Then Plutonian from Mark Waid's Irredeemable, which I do remember that. And Samaritan from Astro City, I'm not familiar with.
I don't feel like I know Omni-Man, Plutonian, and Samaritan well at all. At some point I'm going to read those three series, but they're not high on my list to read. Well, Matt, can you think of any other Superman knockoffs?
That's about it. Unless you want to include characters like, it wasn't Alpha Centaurian, like, supposed to be a Superman knockoff?
If you really want to go, you could go Supergirl, Shazam, Captain Marvel.
Maxima.
Yeah, Maxima. Yeah, there's a lot in the Legion, right? There's Andromeda and Mon-El and Ultra Boy.
The list is endless, Bob. There's so many clones.
Do you have a particular favorite Superman knockoff, Matt?
I've always liked Gladiator from the Imperial Guards. I might just go with him.
It's great. There haven't been many great comics focused on Gladiator.
But anytime he shows up, he's going to destroy something.
I would go Icon from Milestone. I've read the whole Icon series from the early 90s. It's great. I wouldn't mind us covering it for the podcast at some point.
That'd be great, yeah.
Really cool. And then I'm very fond of Supreme, too. The Alan Moore run on Supreme from the late 90s is really fascinating.
I did read that back in the day and enjoyed it.
All right, we got our knockoff Supermans. So, Matt, I think the only question left to us is where to rank Legend of the Blue Marvel. And I'm willing to defer to your taste on this one. Just to set the table, my initial thoughts were this is probably slightly better than John Ridley's Black Panther, but that would put it below a couple of things. Like, it would put it below Batman Broken City, Gotham Year One, and Suicide Squad Get Joker. And to be honest, I think I prefer all three of those to this, but I know you don't like those three comics as much as I do. So if you wanted to put Blue Marvel above them, I could totally get that.
No, I would probably put Blue Marvel. I do think it is better than the Black Panther from John Ridley. But I do not want to put it. It's not better than the Azzarello stuff, honestly. Even though I know that sounds weird, but let's put it as the new number 16.
It's now going to be a 27-item list, listeners. Number 1 is Hickman Fantastic Four. Number 15 is Suicide Squad Get Joker by Brian Azzarello and Alex Maleev. Legend of the Blue Marvel by Kevin Grevioux and Matt Broom will go in at number 16. We got the John Ridley run on Black Panther at 17. And then our last 3 spots are held down by the Gotham Knights comics.
I doubt the Gotham Knights thing's ever going to change.
Oh, no.
We're going to read worse, though? You're going to make me read worse?
Well, I guess that is the question. There's definitely a lot of worse comics. But the question is, am I going to make you read those worst comics?
Correct. And, and the reason we did read the Gotham Knights run is because we read them as children. So let's go back and revisit that and see what it's like. And also we're doing a deep dive on Hush.
We're doing a deep dive on Hush, which we totally shouldn't have done because it's going to take 5 years for Hush to come out.
We were able to cover all of the entirety of Hush's history before the second one could come out.
In between issues 1 and 2, the entire history of Hush, and a huge 75 issue series that had nothing to do with Hush, but we just wanted to read it because we read it when we were children.
That's amazing.
Hattush took a long time to come out.
Really did.
Well, and I should have emphasized this more at the beginning of the episode, sorry listeners, but the reason we're doing this Blue Marvel comic, apart from it just being very thematically interesting on its own, is we're moving into the Al Ewing Avengers run, which the early parts of the Al Ewing Avengers run spin off tie-in to the John Hickman Avengers run. And the Ewing Avengers I don't think it's like the best comics in the world or anything, but I find it interesting and I want to see what Matt thinks of the many different forms Al Ewing's Avengers have taken, some of which I think he'll like better than others. But if we were ever going to do it, doing it right after the Hickman run is the time to do it. So we're going to go ahead and try to do it. We're going to start with Mighty Avengers Volume 2, which is the first Al Ewing Avengers comic. It's a 14-issue series, and if I'm remembering correctly, Blue Marvel goes ahead and starts appearing in Mighty Avengers. We might take a slight break for Christmas listeners, but when we're back, we'll be doing the first Al Ewing Avengers series, Mighty Avengers Volume 2, number 1 through 14. So join us for that. Thanks for joining us for the Hickman run. Thanks for joining us for this interesting comic, Legend of the Blue Marvel. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. We hope everybody has a great night.
Thanks for listening.